Yuji is your average corporate worker who gets worked to his bone and eventually dies from overwork. Soon, he gets reincarnated into another world as a tamer, which is recognized as the weakest class. But he soon befriends some overpowered slimes and decides to do some charity work for free. In a dark forest, Yuji gets ambushed by an ugly monster as he dodges its attacks smoothly. He then summons his slimes to take down the monster, and these Walmart versions of Rimuru destroy the monster with a single strike. With this, Yuji heads to the town and leaves the monster's dead body behind. At the Adventurers Guild, some losers are arguing with a guy whose barber did him dirty as he tells them about some slimes that breathe fire. They keep mocking him until eventually, Yuji enters the guild and approaches the desk. The lady deems Yuji a low-life failure like herself and assumes that he is here to cancel his request. However, much to her surprise, Yuji had already finished the task and is here to deliver the Drya flowers. This shocks the woman because these flowers are insanely rare as she rushes to call her chief. Seeing all these flowers, the chief comments that these would be enough for at least 2 years and decides to buy all of them. As they are conversing, another guy rushes into the guild and informs them that smoke signals have appeared in the forest. Yuji asks him slimes about this and gets informed that about 10,000 monsters are heading towards the town for some reason. Hearing this, the chief pisses himself and instructs the adventurers to leave the town because he knows their presence won't do anything. However, it seems like the adventurers have some dignity as they refuse to leave and want to protect the people. During all this, Yuji proposes that he can recreate dragon's fire using a dragon's bone and obliterate the monsters. All the adventurers refuse to believe him, but the guy who had beef with his barber convinces them and offers to help as well. Following this, all adventurers prepare to intercept the monsters, while Yuji climbs the tower while gathering intel from his allies. Even though the adventurers are scared they still want to help protect the town and its people. Just as the battle begins, Yuji announces that he'll finish this off in 15 minutes using Sage's special skill Magic Maker. Just then, numerous screens appear in front of him, and Yuji somehow processes all this information at once. During all this, Yuji receives intel from the Dryad that they have noticed a shady guy in the forest holding something. Yuji uses the CCTV camera he uses to peek into the girls' changing room to see the guy, and immediately realizes that he's carrying a magic stone. Without thinking further, he decides to destroy the stone using his slimes. He forges a barrier around the stone and dispels the magic stone. Amidst all this, Lily is spying on Yuji because she has nothing better to do. He also captures the shady guy, but he commits suicide. Yuji also notices that the adventurers are having a hard time against these monsters and decides to lend them a hand. He instructs his underlings to help these pathetic excuses for adventurers. Meanwhile, Yuji has forged a plan to take out all these monsters at once and instructs Lily to call back all the adventurers. He also instructs his slimes, hiding in the forest, to return immediately. As they are heading back, one of the monsters makes its way to the entrance, but gets confronted by the guy who identifies as a pineapple. Seeing that he is struggling against it, another adventurer rushes to help him, and together they manage to kick him out the entrance. With the help of Yuji's wolf, they eventually defeat the monster and head inside. With this, Yuji forges a barrier around the town and unleashes Hellfire of Demise. This spell nukes everything outside the barrier, including the forest, totally adding to global warming, but Yuji couldn't care less about that. The adventurers cannot comprehend how a tamer can unleash such overwhelming magic. Aegis even comments that anyone who uses magic of such caliber is basically committing suicide. This concerns Lily, and she rushes towards Yuji, who is feeling weak because of this spell. He is then informed by his slimes that the monsters are quite persistent, just like my Yandere X. With no other option left, Yuji decides to cast the spell once again as Lily attempts to stop him. Yuji, however, doesn't care about her opinion because she is a woman, and casts the spell nevertheless. This spell obliterates everything in the town surrounding it as Yuji falls to the ground. Yuji wakes up after some day to find his slimes and Lily standing beside him. In the meantime, the Aegis and the other adventurers have discovered the magic circle and the shady guy's dead body. Lily expresses her gratitude to Yuji for saving the town, even though he barely knows them. She then questions the reason behind his actions, but Yuji remains silent like Chad. This makes him remember the days when his work wasn't appreciated by anyone, and he gets happy. Later on, Lily brings some clothes to Yuji, only to find no one in the room. Yuji has escaped the town because he doesn't want to cause a huge scene. The following morning, Lily informs Aegis about this as he deems Yuji a hero who saved the town and disappeared without a trace. He also informs her that the guy behind all this must belong to the cult they have been hearing about. Yuji overhears all this using his slimes and wonders what this cult is. He then reaches the next town alongside his sidekicks. With all of this going on, a wannabe Heihachi instructs his lackey that they are looking for a loner adventurer who has never experienced love his entire life, just like you guys. Upon reaching the town, Yuji and his slimes search for food, as Yuji realizes that they are attracting a lot of attention. After grabbing some food from a local vendor, Yuji heads to the Adventurers Guild, where he approaches the receptionist who underestimates for being a tamer, which makes him wonder if he cannot register here. Just then, the lady notices something and clarifies that he can register here because he has enemy tracking skills, and people like that are rare. Yuji then registers himself and starts looking for some jobs. Suddenly, he gets approached by a guy who introduces himself as Rhodus, a dagger expert. He asks if he is looking to join a party alongside two lolis who introduce themselves as Tina and Lisa. Yuji also introduces himself and reveals that he's a tamer, which shocks Rhodus, and he underestimates him just like the quiet kid in class is. The girls, however, are in favor of recruiting him because he can track enemies and save their lives. They also mention something about Rhodus's notorious past and how his party members always disappear. With no other option, Rhodus has to accept Yuji, and their journey begins. Their task is to locate the Earth Dragon's hideout, and Yuji is tasked with tracking enemies. On their way, Yuji's slimes inform him about some wolves ahead, and he leaves Rhodus to deal with them. It turns out that Rhodus is not as useless as he looks. His slimes wonder why Yuji let that guy take down those wolves when they could have eliminated them for him. Yuji tells them that he wanted to gouge their abilities and continues the journey. At night, they have to camp as Rhodus takes them off the path, because it is better to camp away from the path in smaller groups. As they are eating, Tina comments that Yuji gets along well with his slimes, as he tells her that they are his trusted partners, which makes them insanely happy. They then question him regarding his tracking abilities, but Yuji refuses to answer. Rhodus then announces that they should rest, asking Tina to take the first watch, and he'll replace her after some time. According to him, Tina and Lisa should take the first and last watches because they need proper sleep for combat. This makes Yuji wonder if Rhodus is actually a good guy. In his sleep, Yuji dreams about the day he got reincarnated into this world after dying by Overwork Kun, who is preparing to take over Truck Kun's job. As soon as he wakes up in this world, he comes across a slime and accidentally forms a contract with it. The slime leads him into the forest, and Yuji blindly trusts him, just like I trusted my manipulative ex. The slime leads him to a mysterious place where he notices numerous books and grabs one randomly. It turns out that Yuji can acquire magic just by reading the book, and it even pumps up his MP and HP. Suddenly, more slimes appear out of nowhere and offer to become his pets. Yuji tames all of them, and the slimes proceed to read the books for him. Since the slimes are his pets, Yuji acquires skills even if they read the books. He eventually acquires the status Sage. The slimes even start talking and cheering for Yuji. In the present, Yuji wakes up from his dream, with the slime informing him that Rhodus has escaped from the camp, and the girls are chasing after him. Proud Wolf is also following Rhodus alongside some slimes, and barely manages to escape Rhodus's dagger, who has figured out that someone is chasing him. Tina and Lisa had their suspicions regarding him when he set the watch schedule because he is not the type to care about others. After dodging some traps, Rhodus eventually reaches his hideout and reports to the wannabe Heihachi. He tells him that he has found two lolis who will fetch a good price, even though they are flat as cutting boards, and another guy who will eventually die on his own. Yuji is listening to all this using his CCTV slimes, and realizes that the rumors about Yuji were true after all. Heihachi, on the other hand, asks Rhodus to make this quick because the blue moon is appearing soon. According to legends, the blue moon brings calamity, and they should be wary of that. Hearing this, his servant mocks him, which infuriates Heihachi, and he chokes him like his daddy. Meanwhile, Tina and Lisa wonder what they should do, and conclude that they should act hastily. They decide to head back, but being women, they accidentally stumble upon the traps, which informs Rhodus of their presence. Rhodus immediately heads outside to capture them, but notices a massive monster, which is actually Proud Wolf and the gang. Heihachi comments that he has never seen something like this and decides not to engage the monster. In the meantime, Yuji looks up some spells to get rid of these goons and picks out the weakest one. He transfers the spell Ranged Frost Medium to his slime and casts it upon their hideout. It turns out that the spell was way too overpowered as it freezes the entire hideout. The slimes bring out Heihachi to capture him, which shocks Tina and Lily. Upon seeing Heihachi, they immediately recognize him as Gelios, the infamous bandit famous around these areas. Both of them are quite shocked after witnessing Yuji's strength and question him about him. Being an introvert, Yuji doesn't like people meddling in his business and refuses to answer them. With no other option left, they continue their journey, but get some rest before. Yuji has decided to trust them and scavenges the perfect location for their camp. He even sets the camp using his slimes, which shocks Tina and Lily because they aren't used to such princess treatment. Later on, Yuji remembers Heihachi mentioned a certain organization named the Blue Moon of Salvation and concludes that they must be behind the attack on Fastan. With all of this going on, an old guy is staring at the moon. Yuji, Tina, and Lily have reached the place where they are supposed to investigate the Earth Dragon, as Tina comments that there are no signs of the dragon around here. Yuji then questions them about the strong winds in this region, which Tina stating that these winds originate from the Delight Gorge, which is also known as the Valley of Wind. Some people even say that these winds are due to the Earth Dragon's stinky breath. Following this, they begin their investigation with Yuji using his slimes, who inform him that they haven't located the Earth Dragon yet. Tina and Lily, however, are way too confident on Yuji's slimes and are literally simping over them. This makes Yuji remember the time when he participated in the Adventurer Registration exam, where he accidentally destroyed the magic ball used to measure magic. Later on, he was asked to strike a stone with his magic, and Yuji shocked all of them by using magic without any incantation. Seeing this, the instructor informed him that even though wordless magic is a high-level skill, it reduces the magic output. Yuji then uses the incantation and crushes the stone, just like my ex crushed my tiny heart into pieces. That even made him realize that he should use some weaker spells and eventually finds a spell that weakens his own magic. He then uses his slimes to test out this skill and gets rid of all the monsters in the forest. As they are walking, Tina wonders why they haven't come across any monsters, as Yuji reveals that the slimes have defeated them, which shocks them. Just then, the sky turns purple, which makes them wonder if Yuji is behind this as well, but he replies negatively. Meanwhile, another guy who is a huge Loli fan and is apparently cosplaying as Megumin is watching this scenery alongside a priest. Yuji then asks his slime if they have found something, to which they tell him that they cannot feel any monsters at all. Suddenly, the purple cloud starts spinning as the priest asks the Megumin cosplayer about the blue moon and informs him about the disaster prophecy. Just then, a massive blast occurs and an ominous blue dragon appears in the forest. Seeing this, Yuji instructs the Proud Wolf to retrieve all the slimes as he informs Tina and Lily about the blue dragon. He further tells him that this dragon is way stronger than the Earth Dragon, and they decide to retreat. Tina asks them to follow her into the Delight Gorge, which is a safe zone, because monsters don't like the strong winds. Despite this, Yuji asks his slimes to scout the area with Proud Wolf as they kill all the monsters they come across. Meanwhile, Tina and Lily are still simping over the slimes. As they are conversing, the Earth Dragon appears before them, and the girls literally piss themselves. The Sakura duo then hides behind a rock, but Yuji stays behind. He decides to take down the Earth Dragon and tries attacking it with some weaker spells. Seeing that the weaker spells have no effect on the dragon, he decides to use stronger spells, but doesn't want to overdo it. In the meantime, the dragon hurls some rocks towards the Sakura duo, and Yuji saves their sorry asses once again. Inspired by Cannon Bolt, the dragon starts rolling like a cannon and ambushes Yuji, who dodges his attack rather smoothly. He then lures the dragon to the source of these winds and traps him there. With no other option left, Yuji obliterates the dragon with Hellfire of Decimation, which turns the dragon into my grandma. Tina believes that Yuji used the underground minerals to cause an explosion, and since Yuji wants to hide his abilities, he agrees to this. After this, they head to the guild, where they reveal that they defeated the Earth Dragon at Delight Gorge, which shocks the counter lady, and she refuses to believe them. Yuji then pulls an UNO reverse and brings out the dragon's skull. He also pulls out the Heihachi cosplayer they had captured before, and gets a huge reward for it. Just then, the Lolicon approaches Yuji and invites him to a meeting where they are discussing the countermeasures against the blue dragon. They ask Yuji to draw the dragon because he has seen it up front, and Yuji uses his skill to basically print the dragon's picture. Seeing this, the priest comments that it resembles the picture he found in a book of myths. The priest further informs them that the dragon can destroy an entire continent in 3 days, which makes it a mythical class monster. This makes the Lolicon question how the dragon was sealed. The priest tells him that a messenger with power that rivals that of a god appeared and defeated the dragon. Suddenly, the Lolicon remembers the reason this dragon appeared. He recalls that 30 years ago, a ritual was carried out in the royal capital when the moon and the sun overlapped in a line with the stars. The priest also remembers it as the divine spirit summoning ritual and agrees with him. As they are conversing, the sky turns purple again, and Yuji's slime informs him that the dragon has gotten even bigger. This makes them realize that the dragon grows whenever the sky changes color. With no other option left, the lolicon decides to attack the dragon with everything they have. Later on, as Yuji and his slimes are savoring their food, the Sakura duo approaches him and insists that they join the battle against the blue dragon. They are confident that Yuji and his slimes will defeat the dragon. Following all this, Yuji gets summoned by the priest, who tells him that he received a message from the divine oracle and has brought something. He then hands over a short sword to him, stating that Yuji might be able to use it. Later that night, Yuji remembers the time Examiner told him that he is way too overpowered and decides to take down the dragon himself. Yuji sets out with Proud Wolf and his slimes into the forest without informing anyone. Upon reaching there, he instructs all his slimes to evacuate while leaving one behind. He wants to attack the dragon with Hellfire of Demise, but its range of attack is way too wide, and he decides to go with Hellfire of Decimation, the attack he used against the Earth Dragon. As expected, the attack doesn't do shit to the dragon, and it retaliates with launching beams that destroy the forest. He protects himself and the slimes with a barrier. Just then, the slime he had left behind informs him that the dragon is absorbing energy from the destroyed forest and is growing bigger. Yuji then pulls out the short sword, which is as short as Sakura's battle against Madara. Yuji wants to concentrate his Hellfire of Demise on the tip of this short sword and attack the dragon with it. With this, Yuji hops onto the Proud Wolf and approaches the dragon. The dragon launches another attack aimed towards Yuji, but he manages to stop it with a barrier. Just as he reaches below the dragon, the slimes comment on how massive it actually is, because that's what she said. With a combination of jump boost and his barrier, Yuji manages to reach the dragon and pierces its eye with the sword. He then activates the Hellfire of Demise and believes that the dragon is dead, but suddenly the dragon smashes Yuji into the mountain. Yuji realizes that he'll be dead if he loses focus for a moment, and also notices that his MP is in negative. The dragon then launches another beam towards Yuji, which gets stopped by his barrier. At this point, Yuji wants to bring the dragon down, and wonders if freezing it would help. As he is scrolling through his skills, a timer appears in front of him stating Divine Strike. Just as the dragon stops attacking him, Yuji activates the Divine Strike and the dragon drops to the ground. Yuji then hops onto Proud Wolf and approaches the dragon again. This time around, he manages to decapitate the dragon using Hellfire of Demise, and the dragon is dead. Yuji then heads back to the town, and as he is lying down, someone knocks on his door. Much to his surprise, it is Captain Lolicon who informs him about the dragon's death and that the priest has left the town. He also urges Yuji to request for help if he ever needs to defeat a dragon. After all this, Yuji has breakfast with the Sakura duo, who are disappointed that they couldn't get to fight the dragon, even though they would have been pretty much useless, just as their name Sakura duo suggests. They then ask Yuji regarding his future plans, as he reveals that he wants to move to another city. He also asks them for recommendations regarding this. Lily suggests that he travels to Ricardo, which has some fascinating cuisine. Later on, Yuji bids farewell to the Sakura duo and leaves the town. He leaves his slimes back to protect the duo because he has taken a liking to them. On his way, he gets contacted by the Dryad, who informs him that mushrooms have started growing at the place where he defeated the dragon. She further tells him that these mushrooms can be turned into mana, restoring potions, and wants Yuji to help her. The blue ones can even return mana, which piques his interest, and Yuji decides to help her. He then instructs his slimes to gather the mushrooms and makes things a lot easier for the Dryad. She then begins preparing the mushroom, but for some reason, the blue mushroom potion is not turning blue. She suggests that they should use pure water, as Yuji recommends distilling the water. As they are distilling the water, Yuji notices the color of potion is quite similar to the magic stones they encountered before. This makes Dryad remember the time she met Yuji the first time. Yuji had saved her by sharing some of his mana when Dryad was on the verge of death. She told him that someone had placed a magic stone in the forest which made her sick. Hearing this, Yuji dispels the magic stone, but something is still off as suddenly, monsters appear from the stone. Yuji traps them inside his barriers and uses Hellfire of Decimation to obliterate them. In the present, Yuji questions the reason this potion resembles the magic stone. The Dryad tells him that the magic stone must have contained Dragon's Grace, which is an incredible power that exists only at places where a dragon has been defeated. She further tells him that the Dragon's Grace is neither good or evil, and it depends on how it is used. After this, Yuji notices that the water has been distilled, and the Dryad prepares the potion again. This time around, the water turns blue, which makes her insanely happy, and she hugs Yuji, which makes him brick up. After the dryad heads back to her forest, Yuji and his slimes head to their next destination through dense fog. On their way, Proud Wolf senses some humans and leads Yuji to a village where the creepy villagers keep staring towards Yuji. A weird guy approaches him and offers him to stay the night, but Yuji refuses. He then offers him food, but Yuji refuses that as well. After asking the name of this village, Yuji takes his leave. Meanwhile, the weird guy informs someone about Yuji's visit to their village and informs him that they will harvest the dragon's grace tomorrow. In the meantime, Yuji eventually reaches the Ricardo, which is covered in snow, even though it is supposed to be a sunny city. On their way to the town, Yuji asks Proud Wolf and the slimes if they are fine. To tackle the extreme cold, Yuji looks up some spells and eventually comes across an insulation barrier that will keep them warm. After walking some more, they reach Ricardo where Yuji questions the guard regarding these weird circumstances. In response to this, the guards tell him that they are also quite shocked by this chill that set in out of nowhere about 10 days back. They then question Yuji's presence there, who tells them that he is there for some food, which makes them insanely happy, and they allow him inside. They also recommend a famous restaurant named Tiger's Flame Pavilion. After wandering around for some time, Yuji reaches the restaurant, where the girl informs him that the restaurant is closed and won't open for some days because they don't have enough wood. With no other option left, Yuji decides to get some wood for them. The girl had informed him that freshly chopped wood won't help because it produces too much smoke and it has to be dried for at least a year. After this, Yuji reaches the forest where he brings out an axe and accidentally flattens the entire forest. Someone teach my man about climate change and global warming. Now that he has acquired some wood, it is time to dry it as Yuji begins searching for a spell. He comes across a spell named Slime Moisture Absorb and uses his slimes to dry the wood. With this, Yuji takes all of this to the restaurant and shows his wood to the girl, which shocks her. The girl proceeds to show the wood to the head chef, who is inspired by Vegeta's receding hairline, to see what he thinks about it. After examining the wood, the head chef concludes that the wood is too dry and cannot be used. Yuji, however, has not given up as he uses his slime to adjust the wood's dryness. This time around, the chef approves the wood and prepares something for him. Following some wait, the chef comes up with some grilled Angus cattle with Reincarnated herbs, and as soon as Yuji takes a bite, his soul ascends to heaven. The chef further reveals that this steak is not his speciality, and that his special dish is a stew, which takes a while, and they need more wood. Hearing this, Yuji reaches the Adventurers Guild, where he takes a woodcutting job. The counter lady informs him about their firewood leader Wadka and asks Yuji to meet him. Following some formal introductions, Wadka informs Yuji that they need 5 tons of wood every day, but they cannot keep up with the demand. He then asks Yuji to showcase his skills as he brings out his massive axe and chops down multiple trees at once. This shocks all of them as Wadka starts contemplating his life decisions, and Yuji proceeds to chop the trees into perfect pieces. He even dries them using his slimes and carries them to the guild, where Wadka informs the counter lady about his heroics. Hearing all this, the lady comments that she has heard about a strong tamer that used slimes to carry stuff in a church. This makes Yuji wonder if Father Stale would know more about it. Yuji then informs them that he has more firewood, which won't fit in the guild, and he has to place it outside. After knowing that all this firewood is worth just 3 days, Yuji offers to gather some more wood, but the lady hesitates, stating that it would be tough for him. This makes Yuji realize that not all people are scum like himself and continues helping them. After gathering all this wood, Yuji finally gets to savor Ricardo's famous Angus cattle stew and Reincarnated herbs. The chef also serves some meat and herbs to Proud Wolf and the slimes. They express their gratitude towards Yuji for everything he has done for them. Just as they take the first bite, Yuji's soul leaves his body again, and they start crying. Seeing this, the chef reveals that he can prepare even better dishes, but they don't have access to the Reincarnated herbs owing to some monsters. This infuriates Yuji, and the friendly neighborhood Yuji leaves the restaurant for some more charity work. He uses his slimes to take down the monsters, and during all this, he comes across a mysterious stone. He asks Dryad to take a look at it, but much to his surprise, even the useless Dryad doesn't know anything about it. Just as Yuji touches the ball, he realizes that it must be the dragon's grace because it is absorbing his mana. Dryad comments that the magic in this area is also weakened by this ball, which makes them realize that the frost is also because of it. He instructs his slimes to search for all the mysterious balls scattered around the forest. After locating all of them, he creates a map using thoughtography and notices that these balls create a perfect circle and there must be something in the middle. Even though everything seems normal, Yuji notices that the trees are awfully huge and decides to destroy the forest. He then uses Hellfire of Demise to completely obliterate the forest, giving everyone Hiroshima flashbacks. This blast creates a huge crater and Yuji notices an entrance in the middle. He seems unusually excited to discover the entrance, which makes the slime question why he is doing all this for a small town. In response to this, he asserts that the only reason he wants to save this town is food. He smashes open the entrance and notices some stairs going downwards. He enters the passage alongside the slimes, leaving behind Dryad and Proud Wolf. The slimes rush to explore the dungeon, while Yuji instructs Dryad to head back to the forest because they don't know what's lying inside. Meanwhile, the slimes lead Yuji to a Doofenshmirtz secret lab, which makes him wonder what such advanced technology is doing in this world. As Yuji is thinking about all this, the slimes keep exploring the room like annoying brats and come across some stones. Yuji rushes to examine the stones and realizes that these stones resemble the ones they have been collecting all this time. Just then, two losers appear at the spot, and after seeing that the stones are damaged, they leave the dungeon to inform all this to their lord. Amidst all this, Yuji and the slimes keep exploring the dungeon. Yuji wants to stay cautious, but the slimes are way too carefree for that, and he has to hide them using magic. He then leaves the exploring to them and gets outside to Proud Wolf. Sometime later, the slimes inform him that they have found the capped guys as Yuji instructs them to follow those guys. Just as the slimes sneak through the door, they come across a blind end which shocks them. Unlike you guys who don't have survival skills and would probably die under such circumstances, Yuji realizes that there must be a trick and notices two handles. He then asks the slimes to pull the handles at the same time and the door miraculously opens. The slimes eventually come across another ladder and inform Yuji about it. He asks them to climb the ladder while he and Proud Wolf reach a cliff from where they can visualize the Messiah village. The slime also enters the village after climbing the ladder. They immediately recognize it as the village with furries and weirdos. Wandering across the village, they come across the capped losers, informing Lord Javier about the stones. Yuji is also listening to their conversation via slimes, and wonders if they are members of the Blue Moon of Salvation, and realizes that they must be hiding in a deserted village to create magic stones. The guys inform him that the source of the curse has been destroyed, and the magic injection device has also been obliterated. This shocks the beta version of Hercules, and he gathers all the members. He instructs them to retrieve the magic stones and kill everyone in their way. Hearing all this, Yuji instructs his slimes to surround the village from a 1-kilometer radius and capture the members. Meanwhile, the slimes in the village are instructed to find the remaining villagers as one of them manages to find Javier and the others. They want to escape once they have retrieved all the magic stones, and upon hearing this, Yuji instructs his slimes to explore the village deeper. Two of the slimes come across a bright room with a plethora of books and some letters. Yuji asks them to absorb these books and letters without anyone knowing. In the meantime, the slimes in the forest come across some members and capture them immediately. Much to their surprise, the members commit suicide, but they cannot let any of them leave since they are dangerous. Meanwhile, the slimes in the bright room have noticed a huge metallic door, but they cannot seem to open it. What's worse is that there are no handles this time, and Yuji has to figure out something. After carefully examining the room, he notices 5 sources of light and instructs the slimes to blow them out at once. With this, the door opens and reveals a huge treasure and a skeleton. Just as the slimes are enjoying their time, a guy discovers all this and informs Javier about this, who pisses himself after hearing this. He is also informed about the members being dead. Yuji, on the other hand, is wondering if he should eliminate them because they have been discovered. The capped losers, on the other hand, are wondering why Yuji hasn't eliminated them, as Javier postulates that he must have discovered the Flame of Cleanse, everything that will activate once they are dead. Hearing this, Yuji postpones his plan of eliminating them. Javier, however, has some other plans in mind as he decides to take revenge by killing himself, so the device gets activated. He then commits suicide alongside other members. Just then, the ground starts shaking, and Yuji somehow manages to evacuate the slimes. He then forges some barriers around the village, but he is not sure if they will be enough. Just as the flame emerges from the ground, it engulfs everything in its path, but the barrier somehow contains it. However, Yuji has realized that the barriers won't hold out much longer and searches for a stronger barrier. Much to his disappointment, his arsenal of magic spells doesn't have a stronger barrier as he decides to create one. He uses Dispel Curse and Ice to forge a barrier named Total Isolation Array that somehow manages to contain the flame, and a huge blast occurs. With this, Yuji is done with his charity work as he heads back to the town where the villagers have been searching for him. They inform him that the frost has ceased and the ice is slowly melting as well. The following morning, Yuji is invited by the townsfolk for a party to celebrate all this. Just as he reached the venue, the crowd started cheering for him and called him the main character. I guess they have breached the fourth wall and have become self-aware. As they are celebrating, The chef and his lackey express their gratitude to him for defeating the boars and have prepared the perfect stew for him. Upon taking the first bite, Yuji's soul leaves his body and he falls unconscious. Later that night, Yuji decides to study the documents he found in the Messiah village, but for some reason, the documents vanish as soon as opens them. He finds just one document with intact writing, which was about some assassination targets. In the meantime, some other thugs have also gotten their hands on this document and seem overly excited. Watch this next video,